$100 billion company just walked away from California, not because of its products, not because of demand, because of one number, $40 million. But here's the part no one tells you. That wasn't a cost. It was a signal. A signal that capital is no longer loyal. A signal that talent will follow the math. Toyota Motor. North America didn't just move an office, it moved the center of decision-making, the place where strategies are built, where billions of dollars are allocated. And once that center moves, everything else starts to follow. Supply chains shift, careers relocate, local economies quietly lose their backbone. This wasn't a relocation, this was a transfer of power from a high-cost system to a system designed to attract and keep capital. And here's the uncomfortable question. If a company like Toyota can leave after 30 years, what does that say about every other company still there? For more than 3 decades, California wasn't just a location. It was the command center of Toyota Motor North America. Every major decision flowed through it. Strategy, finance, logistics, leadership, all concentrated in one place. This is how modern corporate power works. You don't just build factories, you build ecosystems. Around that headquarters, an entire network formed. Law firms, suppliers, consultants, thousands of careers tied to a single gravitational center. And the assumption behind this system was simple. Talent would stay, because California offered something no other place could: access to innovation, proximity to global capital, a lifestyle that justified the cost. So companies accepted the trade-off. Higher taxes, higher salaries, higher operating costs, because the return was supposed to be greater. But here's where the model starts to crack. What happens when that equation flips? When the cost of keeping talent exceeds the value they generate in that location? When employees themselves start questioning the math? Because this isn't just about what companies pay, it's about what employees keep. A senior executive earning millions sees a massive difference between staying in California and moving somewhere like Texas. Now multiply that across thousands of employees. Suddenly, the system isn't just expensive, it becomes inefficient. And once a system becomes inefficient at scale, it doesn't collapse overnight. It gets optimized away, quietly, strategically, permanently. So the real question isn't why Toyota left, it's why the system that kept them there stopped making sense. The shift didn't happen overnight. There was no single breaking point. It started quietly. Taxes went up. Cost of living kept climbing. Regulations became more layered, more complex, more expensive to navigate. California didn't collapse. In fact, on the surface, it still looked strong. But underneath, something was changing. The cost of operating wasn't just high, it was becoming structural. Housing costs pushed employees further away from job centers. Longer commutes meant lower productivity. Higher salaries became necessary just to maintain the same standard of living. For companies like Toyota Motor North America, this wasn't a small adjustment. It was a compounding problem. Every year, the baseline cost increased, not because of expansion, but simply to maintain the same operations. And here's where the pressure builds. When costs rise faster than value, margins shrink. When margins shrink, flexibility disappears. And when flexibility disappears, companies start asking uncomfortable questions. Do we really need to be here? Because the original deal was clear. Pay more, but get more. Access to top-tier talent, access to innovation ecosystems, access to opportunity. But what happens when those advantages start to spread elsewhere? When other states begin offering similar talent pools without the same financial burden? Now the equation changes. This is no longer about preference. It becomes a financial decision. And once that shift happens, loyalty to a location starts to fade, not because companies want to leave, but because, at scale, staying no longer makes economic sense. So, the real question becomes, if California is no longer the only place to win, Why keep paying the highest price to stay? Now let's move past the narrative and look at the numbers. Because this is where the story stops being theoretical and starts becoming unavoidable. California's top personal income tax rate sits at 13.3%, one of the highest in the United States. Corporate tax? Close to 9%. Now layer on top of that housing costs among the highest in the country, operating expenses that keep rising, and a labor market that demands higher wages just to keep up. This isn't just expensive. It's structurally expensive. And then you compare it to the alternative. Texas offers a completely different equation. Zero state income tax, lower cost of living, lower cost of doing business, same country, two radically different systems. And this is where something unusual happened. When Toyota Motor North America made the decision to relocate, they expected resistance. Historically, large corporate moves lose half their workforce, sometimes more. But this time, the opposite happened. 70% of employees said yes. They were willing to leave California, relocate their families, rebuild their lives in a different state. That number changes everything. Because this wasn't just a corporate decision anymore, it became a human decision. Employees weren't forced, they chose. They looked at the same equation, taxes, cost of living, future savings. And they made a calculation. This is where the real signal emerges. People didn't just move locations, they shifted systems. They chose where their money works better, where their income stretches further. In other words, they voted, not in an election, but with their lives. So the question is no longer whether California is expensive. It's this. When both companies and employees start making the same decision, what happens next? This is the moment the story changes. Because Texas didn't wait. They didn't react. They moved first. $40 million from the Texas Enterprise Fund. Not as a subsidy, but as a weapon. They reached out directly, built relationships, made the case in person. This wasn't passive policy. This was active recruitment. They weren't hoping companies would come. They were engineering the outcome. And on the other side, California stayed still. No aggressive counteroffer, no urgent negotiation, no signal that this was a battle worth fighting. That silence matters, because in a world where capital is mobile, inaction is a decision. And that's when it becomes clear. This was never just a relocation. This is a competition between systems. One model is built on extracting value, higher taxes, higher compliance costs, a belief that companies will stay because they always have. The other model is built on attracting value. Lower taxes, simpler regulation, a system designed to make companies feel wanted, not managed. And when you put these two systems side by side, the outcome starts to look predictable. Because capital doesn't have loyalty, it has direction. It flows to where it is treated best, where it grows faster, where friction is lower. Toyota Motor North America didn't just choose Texas, it chose a system that competes for its presence. So now the real question is no longer about one company. It's about the rules of the game itself. If states are competing like corporations, and corporations are optimizing like algorithms, then who actually controls where the money goes next? This is where the story flips. Because this was never really about Toyota Motor North America. Toyota is just the signal, the visible move everyone can point to. But the real shift is happening underneath. What's actually leaving California isn't just companies. It's the tax base. High-income individuals, executives, decision-makers, the people who generate a disproportionate share of state revenue. And that changes everything. Because California's system is built on concentration. A small percentage of top earners contribute a massive share of total tax revenue. So, when even a fraction of them leave, the impact isn't linear. It's exponential. Now layer that with corporate exits. When headquarters move, decision centers move with them. That means future investments, future hiring, future growth decisions, all happen somewhere else. Not in California. This is how economic gravity shifts. Slow at first, then suddenly obvious. And once that shift begins, it feeds on itself. Fewer high earners means less tax revenue. Less revenue creates budget pressure. Budget pressure leads to policy adjustments, and those adjustments often increase the burden on those who remain, which creates the next wave of exits. This is not a one-time event. This is a feedback loop, a cycle that reinforces itself. And once that cycle reaches a certain scale, it becomes very difficult to stop. So this isn't about losing one company. This is the early stage of something much bigger. A structural shift in where money is made, where it is taxed, and where it decides to stay. The real question is no longer who left. It's how many more are already planning their exit. Here's how these shifts usually play out. When one company leaves, the next decision becomes easier. Not because every company wants to go, but because the precedent has been set. Risk becomes normalized. Boards become more open. Executives start running the same calculations. And when talent begins to move, money follows. Because talent is where value is created. California is still powerful, still home to innovation, still a global economic force. But here's the difference now. That advantage is no longer automatic. It has to compete. Meanwhile, states like Texas are not waiting. They are building systems designed for one purpose: to attract capital, to retain talent, to reduce friction, and over time, those systems compound. This is no longer about why Toyota Motor North America left. That question is already outdated. The real question is happening right now, behind closed doors. How many companies are running the same numbers, looking at the same map, and quietly preparing to make the same move?